Hoje nós estamos em Nova York e vamos conversar com um ator e diretor dos mais brilhantes desse século. E aqui neste lugar, ele imortalizou numa cena todo o seu amor por essa cidade, Manhattan. Com o seu tipo desajeitado, carente e engraçado, hoje ele é um ídolo em cinema mundial. O maravilhoso Woody Allen.
On old Delancey Street, you know.
51 anos, 19 filmes, entre eles o inesquecível Annie Hall, ganhador de 4 Oscars. Dramas e sensações do homem contemporâneo são narrados em seus filmes, através de uma visão crítica, ao mesmo tempo romântica e bem-humorada. Sem dúvida, ele é o principal nome da última safra de gênios que o cinema produziu e que você vai conhecer melhor nesta noite.
In July,
Eu gostaria de começar essa entrevista lhe perguntando como é que foi a sua infância, como é que foram os primeiros anos da sua vida e como é que era a sua família.
We were a poor family in Brooklyn, in the United States, yeah? And my father drove a taxi and had many jobs. He was a waiter in a restaurant. He drove a taxi and bet on horse races and had a pool room for a while. Many different little jobs. Sold jewelry. Was a bartender. My mother worked in a flower shop, and we never had very much money. And I was not a good student. I never liked school. I didn't like the first school, and I didn't like high school. And then when I went to the university, I went for only 6 months, and they threw me out of the university because my marks were very bad. And I just never liked school when I grew up at all. Nothing about it. And I grew up mostly in the streets. You know, Brooklyn, I wanted to be an athlete when I was younger. I wanted to be a baseball player. And all we did from early morning till late at night was play baseball, nothing else. I was not, or people always think, you know, that I was home with books and that I have glasses. But no, I was popular in school, and I had many friends, and I was a good athlete when I was younger, so I was chosen all the time for many of the teams. So I played a lot of ball and was on all the baseball teams and track teams, and from that point of view, it was fine. It was only in school that I didn't like it. But once school was over, I had many friends, and you know, went to the movies with many friends all the time, and you know, it was not bad.
E a sua criatividade apareceu logo?
I think so. When I look back, I know from the very first time I was in school, I liked very much to write immediately. And even when I was a very little boy, was the one in the class who wrote things, and they were always picked to read to the rest of the class or the school because they were amusing. And this happened from when I was very, very young on. And I was working professionally in radio and television when I was 16. So I know that it happened early.
O que significava para você ser um menino judeu? Você é religioso? Você acredita em Deus?
Religion never meant anything to me as a child, and doesn't now. Not anybody's religion, not Jewish religion or Catholic religion. I was brought up very Jewish. My parents sent me to Hebrew school to learn Hebrew, and they forced me to go to synagogues on Saturday, but I always hated it. I never liked any of it. I always thought it was silly. I think it's silly now. I think all the religions are silly. I think they're all, you know, terrible. And I don't think that that private religious feelings that people have are silly. I think that's different. But I think the organized religions of the world, I do find them silly and you know, terrible. And so growing up Jewish in a religious sense meant nothing to me.
Já que estamos falando da sua infância, o que você pensava ser? E o que seus pais esperavam de você?
Yes, I was an amateur magician. That was also something that interested me when I was a little boy, and I can still do that. It was fun for me when I was growing up. But my parents wanted me to be in something professional. You know, all parents of their generation, of my parents' generation, and, you know, sort of Jewish New York families, they wanted their sons to become doctors or lawyers, or, you know, my parents wanted me to become a pharmacist, and, you know, something solid and substantial that I could rely on. And I wanted to be, you know, anything else. I mean, I wanted to be, you know, a cowboy or a detective or an FBI agent, or, you know, anything but, you know, something more interesting.
Há quanto tempo você está fazendo psicanálise? E qual é a importância da psicanálise na tua vida?
Well, it was important for me, I think. I've been in and out for many years, and I always thought it was important for me. I always thought that it was helpful to me to keep me from being too depressed too often. And, you know, now I'm only depressed a certain amount of time, you know, so it's better for me.
O trabalho é muito importante para você também, né?
The work for me is very important for many reasons, yes, because it's a distraction. So, you know, you get to worry about silly things and you don't worry about important things. You know, if I'm not working, then I worry about that I'm going to get old, sick, or dead, you know. But when I'm working, I worry about, you know, is this scene good, and did the film come out good? Is the color good? Is the actress good? And these things are all silly, but they keep me distracted, and I don't think about anything too terrible. So it's very important from that point of view. And also, it's important because in fiction, you can make things happen the way you want. And you may know from seeing my films over the years that I hate reality. You know, I can't stand the real world at all. I think it's terrible. And so, you know, it's easy to escape into all these creations all the time. I spend the whole year, you know, writing a film and inventing characters and putting costumes on them and creating a whole world that I can live in with the music I want to hear, and it's all very, very seductive. And the opposite of that is the real world that I live in, which is terrible.
Já que você faz análise, o sentimento de culpa é uma coisa muito forte em você?
Guilt? I think normal. You know, I mean, I don't have excessive guilt. I have a normal amount of guilt, and when I stop and it overwhelms me, then I could think about it for a long time and obsess over it, and then it passes for some unexplainable reason, and I don't think about it again for, you know, a long time maybe.
Eu queria falar um pouco sobre o amor, sobre a relação entre o homem e a mulher. Você acha que uma relação pode ser durável com amor? No próximo bloco, o Woody Allen nos fala sobre o amor.
I'm dealing with two guys named Cheech.
O amor, uma constante na vida desse romântico preocupado com a problemática feminina. Casado 3 vezes, faz de suas mulheres companheiras constantes em seus filmes. Foi assim com Diane Keaton e é agora com Mia Farrow. Eu queria falar um pouco sobre o amor, sobre a relação entre o homem e a mulher. Você acha que uma relação pode ser durável com amor?
Yeah, I do think so, but I think that it's you have to just be lucky. I think that it's very rare, and that it's very hard to work at it or to you know, make it happen. I think that you just have to be lucky. You know, it's like a hobby or something. You know, when I was a little boy, I discovered magic, and I loved it. And it's what all I wanted to do all day long is practice and practice and practice, you know, and stand in front of the mirror and practice. And it was an emotional love. And it's the same thing with somebody else. You know, you have to have that feeling. And if you have that feeling, the rest all comes easy. And if you don't, all the ideas and all the intellectualizing and all the working at it doesn't mean anything. But I think you have to be very lucky to to meet somebody and have that feeling. But I think it is possible.
Você já teve uma grande paixão ou você tem medo de ficar dependente de uma mulher?
Well, I think I've been, there's been people that I've loved, women that I've loved in my life. It happens by accident. It just happens accidentally. I don't like being dependent on somebody, anybody. It's always a little bit frightening, but it happens by accident, so there's nothing you can do about it. You look up one day and suddenly find that you do love somebody and you are dependent on them, and then you have to hope that they'll share your feelings. But again, one must be very lucky. I'm a very big believer in luck. People are always angry with me, always criticizing me because I'm so I advocate dependence on luck so much. Everyone likes to feel that they control things, and that you always hear people say, "Well, we make our own luck," But I don't feel that way. I feel that one must be very, very lucky throughout one's life. That much more is dependent on luck in every area of life than people like to admit, because it's frightening to admit that that so much is out of our control. But I do think that so much is, and certainly all the phenomena associated with falling in love. One must be very lucky.
You do care about me.
Oh, Elliot, please, I can't be a party to this. I'm suddenly wrapped with guilt for standing here
Aqui
talking
os
to you on the
atores
street.
falam sobre o amor. Woody Allen nos diz que para ele o amor começa sempre de uma forma inconsciente.
I have my answer. I'm walking on air.
Well, I think both. I think there are some decisions that are made unconsciously, definitely, and there's nothing you can do about them. And I do think that you can fool somebody. I mean, I do think that you can meet somebody and put your best foot forward and behave, try and intuitively understand what it is they would like to hear and what they would be responsive to, and to play that character. And then, of course, you find that later on, you get tired of that, and then both of you become very unhappy. But I do think you can do something to influence it. But a lot of the decisions are just unconscious.
Em muitos dos seus filmes, você aborda problemas do cotidiano da vida moderna, como a solidão, o medo da morte e a alienação. Você poderia nos falar um pouco desses sentimentos?
Well, there are certain problems that I obsess over, and certain problems that I think are the only important problems for a dramatist or a filmmaker to deal with. I never felt that political problems were important enough, or psychoanalytical problems, or social problems. I think the important problems are always existential problems. They're always problems of, why are we here, and what's happening to us, and what is it all about, and why do we die, and those are the most serious problems, and I think those are the things that are most important to deal with. And so, since they obsess me, and when I see other films or other plays, when they deal with those subjects, I enjoy them very much. It's what I write myself.
Como é que é o processo de criação dos seus filmes? Você escreve tudo ou improvisa muito também no set de filmagem?
Well, both. I write everything first. I mean, I write a film, and then when we get there, I never like the actors to feel that they're locked in, to prison with them. If they get the idea across and they want to use their own words, or they have a better idea, that's okay. I don't mind that. I find usually that actors prefer when you write it. They when I say to them, feel free to make up your own things, and they immediately, most of them, want to say, no, it's okay, I like what you wrote, so I do start with a written script. I myself, when I'm acting, in my own thing, pay very little attention to my script. I say whatever words I want to say. You know, I improvise all the time myself.
Escrever para você é uma tarefa difícil ou você escreve facilmente?
I find it easy to write. I'm not saying that the writing is good writing, but on the level that I write, whatever one thinks of it, it is easy for me. I can get up in the morning. I used to write for television. You'd go into an office, and once a week there would be a show on live, and you would just have to sit there and write, and you couldn't not write because there was a show on at the end of the week for an hour. And so I can go into a room in the morning every day if I have to and write and come up with something. I mean, sometimes good, sometimes not good, but it's not hard for me.
Eu estou me lembrando do filme A Rosa Púrpura do Cairo, em que o ator sai da tela e se apaixona pela Mia Farrow, a espectadora, e me pergunto como é que surgiu essa ideia e como é que surgem as suas ideias?
Well, ideas come to me sometimes when I'm trying to get ideas. Sometimes I sit in a room and I force myself and I get an idea that's good. Other times I can be just going to the movies or having dinner or shaving and some idea will happen. And, in that particular idea, I was sitting home thinking of something to write. I mean, that didn't come naturally to me when I was doing something else. And one morning I thought that would be a funny idea that an actor comes off the screen. But then I thought that was only half of an idea, and I thought, so he comes off the screen, and then what? And I tried to write that script, and I thought to myself, well, it will come to me as I write. But it didn't come to me. And I wrote half a script, and he came off the screen, and then nothing happened. And I threw the script away, and I went on to something else. And then one day, months later, I took it out and looked at it, and then I got the idea that the actor who's playing the part in Hollywood becomes nervous over that and comes to the town, and then there's two of them. And then it became worth doing for a movie. Then all of a sudden the idea became good. But before that, it was just half an idea that came to me one morning, in my room.
O diretor grego de cinema, Costa Gavras, me disse que Yves Montand, quando prepara um personagem, passa muito tempo preparando. Já o Jack Lemmon chega na hora de filmar e faz na hora mesmo. Como é que é o seu método de preparação? Você fica em frente ao espelho, você treina muito?
Oh, no, we do everything on the set. I wish I could rehearse because I think it might be helpful, but I don't know what it is. I don't have the patience or I always think if I rehearse, then when I go to do it, it won't be fresh or something. So we don't rehearse anything. The actors don't rehearse, and we go to the set and decide that morning, what are we going to do today? We don't know where we're going to put the camera or what we're going to do, and we make it up, we make up what we're going to do each time, because you feel differently each day, and when you go out in the country or in the city streets and the sun is in one place or it's a cloudy day or, it gives you a different feeling. And so that way we work very, very spontaneously.
No teu filme Manhattan, você já disse tudo sobre essa cidade que você gosta tanto. Mas você poderia nos falar mais alguma coisa sobre Manhattan, sobre Nova York? Daqui a pouco, Woody Allen fala de sua grande paixão, Manhattan. Ilha de Manhattan, o coração de Nova York. Por aqui acontece de tudo na principal cidade do mundo. Seus questionamentos e de seus habitantes foram retratados com maestria no filme Manhattan, considerado um dos mais puros momentos de expressão do cineasta. No teu filme Manhattan, você já disse tudo sobre essa cidade que você gosta tanto. Mas você poderia nos falar mais alguma coisa sobre Manhattan, sobre Nova York?
Well, I feel depressed because when I grew up and I first came to Manhattan, it was the most exciting place that I ever saw in my life. and it has a history of being, a very, very great city, which it was, and I guess it still is. But in the last, 15 years or 20 years, it's very much gone downhill in the quality of life. And when I was making Manhattan, I wanted to make a movie that would show the city in the most romantic way. And I kept looking for places, and it was very hard. I would look, and it would be just garbage. And then I would look someplace else, and it would be dangerous, or, modern buildings that were so ugly that were, everything it becomes harder and harder to show Manhattan as the place that I've always felt it was. The city is not in good shape. I don't know if it will ever come back again to being what it was. I have my doubts that it will. But, and I always feel very depressed about it. I always think to myself, should I move to Paris, or should I think of living somewhere else? I don't, because I still love it, but it's gotten, in the last 20 years, it's gotten much, much worse. It was always, going a little bit down, but in the last 20 years, it got very, very much worse. Everything about it.
Quer dizer que você sente nostalgia?
Oh, yes, I always feel, that's a trap that I always find myself in. I always feel enormous nostalgia for the Manhattan that I grew up with, which is 1942, 41, 43, 44, the war years around then. And my father, of course, knows Manhattan well from 1903, 1910, 20, 30. He really lived in Manhattan when it was wonderful, when there were 100 theaters and horse and carriages and I talk to him about that all the time. Many, many gambling places in New York, and very colorful, and many nightclubs, and it was a wonderful, exciting place.
He adored New York City. He idolized it all out of proportion. No, make that speak. He romanticized it all out of proportion. Yeah. To him, no matter what the season was, this was still a town that existed in black and white and pulsated to the great tunes of George Gershwin. Let me start over. Chapter 1. He was too romantic about Manhattan, as he was about everything else. He thrived on the hustle-bustle of the crowds and the traffic. To him, New York meant beautiful women and street-smart guys who seemed to know all the angles. Too corny for my taste. Let me try and make it more profound. Chapter 1. He adored New York City. To him, it was a metaphor for the decay of contemporary culture. The same lack of individual integrity that caused so many people to take the easy way out was rapidly turning the town of his dreams into... It's going to be too preachy. Let's face it, I want to sell some books there. Chapter 1. He adored New York City, although to him it was a metaphor for the decay of contemporary culture. How hard it was to exist in a society desensitized by drugs, loud music, television, crime, garbage. Too angry. I don't want to be angry. Chapter 1. He was as tough and romantic as the city he loved. Behind his black-rimmed glasses was the coiled sexual power of a jungle cat. I loved it. New York was his town, and it always would be.
Você não gosta de viajar, né?
I don't like to travel too much. I did travel a lot when I was a comedian in cabarets. I traveled all over the United States every day, airplanes. And when I first made films, I made films in Europe and California and traveled all over. But then I got, I don't know, nervous about traveling and bored with traveling. I just wanted to stay home and sleep in my own house and go to my own restaurants and, very much, yes. And so I stopped traveling. I haven't traveled for a while now. I was going to travel this last summer to the Scandinavian countries because I wanted to go someplace where it was cool in the summer, but then the Chernobyl thing happened, and I didn't want to, go and get radiation poisoning.
O fato de você não ser nenhum exemplo de beleza trouxe muitos problemas para você na adolescência ou você nunca deu bola para isso?
No, when I was a boy, I was, as I say, originally I was obsessed with being an athlete. That was the only important thing. Then when I got older, I started getting interested in that and magic, and those things kept me, obsessed. And I didn't think much about anything else really. And then by the time I was 16, I was already writing.
Você faz um tipo no cinema que é aquele tipo urbano, neurótico, né, que atrai muitas mulheres. As mulheres ficam apaixonadas por você. Como é que você explica isso?
Well, I'm urban. I never thought of myself as neurotic. This is something that the press always writes. But I always thought of myself as very middle class and very well adjusted. Really, I get up in the morning. I work. I lead a normal, sort of a normal life. And I don't have terrible neurotic thing. I mean, I'm not afraid of the dark or flying or I don't have a lot of neurotic fears. I am urban, but I don't know. I don't know. I can never answer that because I don't understand it myself.
Eu sei que você gosta muito de perambular pela cidade, aqui por Nova York. Como é que você se sente quando as pessoas te abordam?
I'd rather that they didn't. I mean, I like to, especially living an urban life, I like to walk around the streets and go to stores and shop and do things and not have to think about that. I mean, I always feel embarrassed and it's difficult for me. Other entertainers that I know have no problem with it at all. People come up to them, they say hello, they shake hands, they sign autographs. It's no problem. For me, it's difficult. I would prefer to have a more quiet life.
Eu sei que você admira muito os irmãos Marx e o Charlie Chaplin. Qual a influência deles no seu trabalho? A seguir, Woody Allen nos fala da influência de outros artistas. Fina ironia, alta dose de romantismo e o equilíbrio perfeito entre o drama e o humor. Esses são os principais ingredientes do cinema de Woody Allen. Um estilo, sem dúvida, forjado no ato de viver profundamente as coisas que o cercam. Eu sei que você admira muito os irmãos Marx e o Charlie Chaplin. Qual a influência deles no seu trabalho?
Well, certainly Groucho Marx was an influence because he was very verbal comedian, and I love making jokes in films when I'm working. Charlie Chaplin is different because he made silent movies, and I admire him, but it's very hard to have an influence there because the films are so different. But I've been influenced more by serious people than by comedians. I mean, if you look at the derivations of my work, where it's derivative of other people, nobody ever says over the years, well, this reminds me of Groucho Marx, or this reminds me of Chaplin or Buster Keaton. They always say it reminds me of Ingmar Bergman, or it reminds me of S.J. Perelman, the writer, or Chekhov sometimes. They'll say, in saying where I'm stealing my ideas from, where I'm getting my influence from. But it's not from the comedians.
Você aprecia mais os diretores europeus, não é?
Yes, very much. I prefer them to the American film directors, to the work of the American film directors.
Foi muito difícil para você ultrapassar a sua timidez e fazer shows, se apresentar em teatro, enfim, se tornar um artista de sucesso?
It was difficult for me, yes, because I started as a writer, and I was a writer for years, and that was very introverted and quiet. And then I wanted to be a performer, but it was very difficult to make the transition. And I was very, very nervous about that, frightened. And not frightened that people wouldn't like me. Sometimes I knew they would like me. You know, I would go out every night and do very well. But the next night I was still frightened because, because it's difficult for me to be with a lot of people in that way. So that was the problem. And the success part of it is just good luck. You just do what you do, and some people are lucky and some people aren't. You know, this is what I do, and I was very lucky that a certain amount of people liked it. Steven Spielberg does something, and many more people like it. It's just good luck. What he does naturally, many more people like. Or Sylvester Stallone makes a movie, and many people just like it, and that's what he likes to do. Antonioni does a movie, and only a few people like it. You know, it's much more special. So it's one's degree of success is just good luck.
Já que você mencionou o Stallone, no Brasil há uma grande discussão sobre os filmes dele, sobre a violência. O que você acha dos filmes do Stallone?
I don't take them seriously. I mean, I don't like those kind of films, but not because they're violent, because they're mindless. You know, I don't mind violence. You know, Bonnie and Clyde was a violent film, but a superb movie. These films have no brains to them. You know what I mean? The fact that they're violent is the second, but the ideas behind them are, I think they're dumb ideas, and in some cases even fascistic.
Como é que você conseguiu escapar do alistamento militar?
It was mandatory that you had to go and register for the draft at that time, and I registered, and I went through the physical, and then I went to the doctor, the psychiatrist. Naturally, everybody went, and I went, and he said, "Hold out your hand." I held my hand out, and I was, not shaking or anything. And then he looked at my nails and said, "Do you bite your nails?" And I said, "Yes." And that was it. And they didn't. Yes. I was very lucky. Very, because I brought with me many notes from doctors saying I had asthma and headaches and bad feet and it's everything. And they would look at the notes and, just throw them away and say, no evidence of this. And I was a perfectly fine specimen at the time. But I bit my nails. And it was just a coincidence because I don't always bite my nails. If sometimes I bite my nails for a year, or 6 months or something. Then I stop and, I don't do it at all for 2 years, 3 years. And then one day I bite my nails and I start doing it for a few weeks and I see how I bit them and I stop again. I just happen to be there. It's good luck again.
Pelos filmes que você faz e pelas músicas que você coloca neles, a gente vê que você é uma pessoa muito romântica. Você acha que o romantismo está acabando?
No, I don't see why romance would be over. Romance is a taste that some people have. Not necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of technology, but not so much with. No, I think that most of the world is perfectly environmentally suited to romantic needs. The technology has not yet become completely destructive of romance.
O envelhecimento e a ideia da morte é problema para você?
Yes, more than anything.
Agora que você já completou 50 anos, você tem mais pressa nas suas realizações?
No, when I turned 50, everyone said to me when I turned 30, it would be depressing. But it wasn't. I didn't mind at all. And then they said when you turn 40, it would be depressing. But it didn't bother me. And they said that 50. When I turned 50, I was depressed. That's the first time that I ever noticed it. And it really was a shock to me. I don't know what it is about that number, because perhaps it's half a century, or it's a round number, or a natural milestone. But it definitely depressed me when I turned 50. And it's depressed me all year. I'll be 51 in December, and I'm still not over the trauma of turning 50 last December. It was a big shock to me, And I didn't think it would be. You know, one day before I was 50, didn't bother me at all. And the day I turned 50, I realized what they were all talking about. It became, and it did, it has bothered me for the whole year.
Sim, mas você fala sobre esses problemas com naturalidade.
Oh, I talk about it, but it's a problem.
Você ainda sente insegurança em relação ao seu trabalho ou você já provou para você mesmo que você é um grande talento?
I think it goes in waves. You know, like there are some days or some weeks when I feel very confident and very happy and self-satisfied and wonderful. And then, for some reason, it all evaporates and I feel completely insecure and terrible and, you know, untalented and empty. And then it builds up again and gets better. And then it disappears again. And this is it's up and down all the time.
Como é que você se define politicamente?
Well, probably in a general sense, I would probably say that I would be a liberal Democrat. You know, there are probably some issues here and there that I'm not single issues that I may not be as liberal about, possibly. But generally speaking, I think if you took, you know, the 100 most important political issues, I would probably be liberal about almost all of them.
Um cineasta que aborda temas parecidos com os seus nos filmes é o Bergman. Só que a grande diferença entre vocês é que você utiliza muito humor. O que é humor para você? No último bloco, admiração por Bergman e sua terapia preferida.
Just did a definitive cinematic study of Gummo Marx. Interestingly, he's the one Marx brother that never made any...
Ao contrário de Ingmar Bergman, que retrata o drama do indivíduo através da manifestação de suas angústias da maneira mais realista, Woody Allen transforma em ironia os problemas do homem de hoje.
I'd give for that wonderful phrase, to hear those three little words. That's all I'd live for the rest of my day. And what I feel in my heart, they just sincerely, no other words can tell it half so clearly. Three little words, 8 little letters which simply mean I love you. What were you trying to say in this picture?
I was just trying to be funny.
O cineasta que aborda temas parecidos com os seus nos filmes é o Bergman. Só que a grande diferença entre vocês é que você utiliza muito humor. O que é humor para você?
Well, if the way you treat a particular subject is not too solemn, and it's and if you can see the funny side of what's really sad about something. I think that's true, for instance, in Chekhov. I think if you see Uncle Vanya, for example, you know, it's quite funny, but it's not funny the way a traditional comedy. It's funny because the characters are so desperate that they become amusing. They're so obsessive and so crazy that they become sort of funny. Bergman is always quite serious. I myself prefer that. I wish that my natural talent lay in his direction rather than mine. I prefer that. I prefer to see his films than my films. And I appreciate that kind of thing more. But my natural ability is in a different direction.
Os seus filmes, quais são os que você mais gosta?
What I liked was some of my least popular films. I liked very much my 3 favorite films of mine were Stardust Memories, Zelig, and Purple Rose. They were not my most popular films, but they were my personal favorite films. I'm disappointed in all my films. I mean, I'm sorry when I look at the final film. In each case, I feel that I made a terrible mistake all the time. But of the ones that have come out to the public, those three, I think, are the best ones.
Enquanto Ana e suas irmãs está quase 2 meses em cartaz no Brasil, Woody Allen termina de montar seu último filme, que tem o nome provisório da Era do Rádio. Agora também ele inicia os trabalhos de seu outro longa-metragem.
Only this. A few years ago, I was in the summertime. I was reading Anna Karenina, and I noticed that there was very interesting structure to do a little bit of a story and a little bit of a story and a little bit different and come back to them all the time. And I thought that would be fun to do in a movie. So when I thought of Hannah, I took a few different ideas I had and put them together and made a movie that for me was like a novel. A little bit of a story, then somebody else's story, then back to this story, then back to that story. And that's where I got that idea.
É aqui que você está montando o seu último filme. Você podia nos falar pouco sobre ele?
I can tell you very little bit. I'm not in it. It's a nostalgic comedy film about the days of radio when I grew up, and it has no plot. It's very many little episodes and stories, much music in it, a tremendous amount of music, and a lot of little episodes about my family when we used to listen to the radio, and also about the people on the radio, about their lives. So there'll be a little story about my family revolving around the radio, and then maybe a little story about some famous people who are on the radio, and then maybe a story about me as a little boy with the radio, and then somebody else. And that's really what it is, a little memoir, and it's, like a cartoon. My interest in music in general has been limited to classical music and New Orleans-style jazz. A certain amount of jazz records, New Orleans-style jazz records, Sidney Bechet particularly, and I taught myself to play the soprano saxophone and then the clarinet, but, this is just only a little hobby. Cowboy or a detective or an FBI agent, I can't stand the real world at all. I think it's terrible. This is what I do, and I was very lucky that a certain amount of people liked it. And I was not a good student. I never liked school.
Fim de ano na rede Manchete. Amanhã, logo após Mania de Querer, Zeca Pagodinho, Jovelina Pérola Negra, Almir Neto, Apoteose do Pagode. Assista agora Aconteceu Internacional. Fique com a gente e feliz ano novo.